Survivor Specialist Phil and Alexa are back, and welcome to September, and welcome to the Survivor Top 100 Players, 30 to number 21. If you followed along on the Russell Hantz Show, you already know the official ranking. We're going to be here to break down our rankings. We're joined by Adam Jumba, who is the producer of the Russell Hantz Show's Top 100. A lot of you probably remember him from last week's where we broke down 50 to 31. He's got Corey. He's got Russell's list in front of him. Russell's not here because he's too busy gambling on anything I tell him to gamble on. It doesn't really matter. I could tell him the sky will be green tonight, and he's like, I'll put 100 on it. Maybe we'll win. So
are you making him money at least?
He's up like $2,500 or something.
Love it.
Yeah. Oh no, he's killing it, and it's because of me. He's got to tip the dealer. But so he's not here for this right now. But we have Adam, who has Russell's and has Corey's list. And Adam, thanks as always for joining. And Alexa, it's good that we have all three of us here. I feel like we haven't had that yet.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I think it's the first time us three have to come together. So I'm excited to get the new perspective.
And now we're into the good stuff. We're in the 30s now.
Yeah, and now we can finally talk about, now like Alexa can actually talk about her picks, which is good, instead of Adam trying to figure out like, why do you have this here? You had Davey at like 38 or 40 or something like that, and I was just like, well, this is because Alexa thinks Davey's cute, and that was like my reasoning for you.
I have a huge crush on Davey. That ups him like 50 spots.
Yeah, exactly. Which, as I've established all of our patrons and to everybody in the Twitter world, I don't use bias because Michelle Fitzgerald, I ranked lower than where she came in on the official list, but we'll get to that. This was an interesting grouping of 10 for sure. I feel like this is one of those where icons are starting to overlap with great winners who haven't played more than once. Yeah. And so because of that, these great winners who haven't played more than once are getting undervalued, where the icons are getting a little overvalued, in my own opinion. And I think we saw that a lot in this week's episode. Lisa Ann Hirschbull, Phil, I finally caught you live. I've been listening to all your podcasts during my back season binges. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I hope you're enjoying the patron content, which has been daily and it's been unreal. And I did my Michelle one today, so I'm glad you're catching us live. This should be fun. You're going to hear a lot of perspectives other than just my own. So maybe tune out when I'm talking in case I contradict myself. But it's interesting. Like, this one starts off with Jerry Manthe and at number 30 and ends with Colby at 21. And I find it fascinating that all the players in between are way better players than both Colby and Jerry, at least in my estimation. What do you guys think?
I mean, I'd also, between the two of them, I would put Jerry ahead of Colby, because I think with Jerry, you actually, it's actually kind of like beautiful in a way, because their arcs are so opposite. Jerry goes from America's villain to, oh my God, like she could have won Heroes versus Villains. And then Colby is Captain America and then kind of stumbles his way out of Heroes versus Villains. So I like, they're always going to be together. So I really like how that rounded out. But even in terms of character, I would say that Jerry's a better character than both character and player than Colby.
You hate Colby. You hate him.
I think hate's a strong word.
No, I know.
But character and gameplay, I would put Jerry ahead of him in both of them. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said at the beginning. This 30 to 21 is kind of an interesting mix of like, winners that haven't really got to extend their legacy because they played once. And Colby and Jerry are obviously two of the biggest icons that have kind of come up just short, at least once or twice. But I had Colby ahead of Jerry, so I'm not surprised that it did that way. But again, I kind of based my list on like the impact that they had on the game. And I think, Colby's impact during the years 2000 to 2005, I mean, he was probably one of the most famous people in America's, for a couple years. So, Jerry might have had the more interesting arc, and I think her arc may have ended a little stronger than Colby's. But if you're looking at like the peak of their, icon status, I think Colby's peak was a little higher. But I'm glad they kind of ended up in the same general area.
Yeah,
I just wish they would have been like an episode or two earlier. I'm glad they ended up in the same general area, but I had Jerry at 70. I had Colby at 42. So I had Colby much higher than Jerry. But then again, and I know, Alexa, we've talked about this a lot on our podcast. It's kind of the whole thing of like, you watch a movie from like 1945 in 2010. It's not going to be as good as it was in 1945, but like, and I think that's kind of what you run into with Colby, because you didn't watch that season live. So I don't think like like in terms of like the cultural, like the massiveness of Colby and just the shock when he lost. I think it's still an argument to be made that Colby's one of the greatest runners up in the history of the show. And I still defend, and I think it was Adam was on here with me. I defend Colby's third game a lot because I think he had no chance in hell. We see it all the time, especially with the new schoolers on season 40. So I'm okay with it. I just feel like 30-21 and some of the people you had Colby coming in ahead of, I'm over here like, whoa. Have we watched Survivor China or Survivor Vanuatu or Survivor Thailand or, I mean, Survivor Korong or Survivor San Juan del Sur? I mean, it's just crazy.
I mean, let's dive into it. Let's do this. Who's everyone's 30?
Yeah. So who you got, Adam?
So my 30 was Ethan, who came, I think, at 33. So I had him a few spots higher. Even though he didn't make it that far in Winners at War, I still believe that Winners at War bumped him up a little bit. Like if he hadn't come, I probably would have had him low 30s, high 40s. I just feel like, even though he won Africa, I don't think he was the best player that season. I think he was a good winner and, showed how strong of a social game can be. But I think he was one of the interesting people in Winners at War. Some of the old school returnees fell flat this season. Like sometimes I would forget Parv was even there, or even Yule towards the end. Like once he got voted off, I kind of just forgot about him. But Ethan managed to kind of stay relevant throughout this season, which was really cool to see. But yeah, I had Ethan up there at 30.
Yeah, I have Tommy Sheehan, and I know he came in really, really low on this list.
Low,
yeah. He was way too low, and I have him. I think he's one of the best social players to ever play the game. There's nothing flashy about it, but I really like Tommy, and I don't understand why he came in so low when here's how I do it. Tommy versus Jerry, they're not even close in terms of actual gameplay. Like Jerry, like in terms of icon status, sure, but Tommy also played in season 39. Like that's not Tommy's fault. Tommy could have went out and played season 2. He'd have been like 6 years old, so it's not really his fault that he didn't get to build up to icon status. And when I sit down and look and I say they played Survivor 10 times, who's going to win more times? Tommy's going to win more than Jerry every single time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if there was one list I could see him being like top 30, I would probably have guessed it would have been yours based on your criteria.
Yeah, I think I'm surprised he came in as low as he did. What number do you have off the top of your head? What number Tommy actually came in? I'm trying to look through. I have like 6 notebooks and I don't know where anything is.
He's a 74.
Yikes.
Woof. I disagree.
So I disagree.
I definitely had him the lowest because, I feel like 10 years from now, I feel like his, icon status and his impact on the game is definitely going to be felt more. But because he's so recent, I didn't have him high on my list based on my criteria. But I agree that he's definitely a better player than being 74.
Yeah, I'm surprised, and I guess that just must be from the averages. But like me putting him at 30, I figured that would have driven him up at least a little bit. But I guess not. And again, I'll just say like Jerry and Tommy, I don't think there's any comparison. I don't even have them in the same ballpark.
They're just two completely different players.
Yeah, and I have him 40 spots high, like 40 spots higher than Jerry. 40 spots. I mean, that's a lot. So I don't know. That's just what I think. Alexa, who was your 30?
My number 30 was Sophie Clark. And she's someone who I'm really interested to see, like if she didn't play Winners at War, she probably would have been put in like the 70s, I think. I think people did not respect Sophie's win whatsoever. I think character-wise, she was overshadowed by Ozzy and Coach and Brandon and a lot of people. Gameplay-wise, it really wasn't even shown. And Albert, kind of right before Winners at War, Albert, who she beat in the Finals Rapid Council, he kind of came out of the woodwork and just really showed how much of the game that he knows and just showed how much he respected Sophie's game. And from what I watched on Winners at War, and what I think a lot of people watched on Winners at War, she kicked ass. And so I think other than like an unstoppable wave of Tony, which I don't think anybody can really survive from. I think she was a legitimate contender to win the game. So I think Sophie's sitting in a really good spot at 30. I think she's a really great winner. And I think now we finally got to see a little bit of that character too, that so many people knew about, but never actually got to see.
Yeah, I had her at 37, so not far off from where you had her. I do think that Winners at War definitely bumped her up for me, and I think that probably was the case for a lot of people. I think I would have had her lower had she not played Winners at War, just because I would have had her probably in the Jenna Maraska area around like 51, 50, just because there wasn't much going on there. So that's just my opinion, but I like that you put her in the top 30. Again, I think a better choice than Jerry, but that's just me. Adam, who did Russell and Corey have?
So let's see. Corey had David Wright.
Okay.
Russell had Yule.
Wow. So
Really?
that's
Definitely
low
the
for
lowest.
Yule. Yeah.
Definitely the
Yule
lowest.
in a bit of a better position than that.
Yeah. I might have Yule ahead of Russell. Don't tell Russell.
Ooh.
I think Yule's Winners at War game turned Russell off a lot. I remember watching one of his player performance reviews. So that might have bumped him down a bit. So, and I agree with what you were saying about Sophie. I think there was kind of like a 1 to 2 episode stretch, like pre-merge, kind of after the tribe swap of Winners at War, where Sophie kind of was looking like she might pull it off. Kind of was, up there as one of the favorites to win for like a good 2 or 3 episodes. So.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, what do you got, Alexa?
I was just going to say my number 29, I have the Queen, Michelle Fitzgerald. Phil, is that okay?
No, that's totally fine. So what's not fine, though, and this is what I have a problem with, and Adam, maybe you're going to be able to help me out on this, but we had the sociopath himself, the man built for the game. The man who, like, literally is the specimen, I'm not going to say human because he's more robot, who should be on every season and would win every season, the Iceman Brian Heidick coming in at 29. Wow, I think this is really low. And Adam, I don't know, was it you, Adam, very low? Because we'll talk about Michelle a lot this episode, Alexa, but I just have to announce here that, like, while Michelle is okay to put at 29, I'm okay with that. Brian Heidick, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, so there's 3. I got lucky this week. There's 3 people who, on my list, ended up at the exact number, which has only happened like once in the list up until this point. So it happened 3 times this week. Heidick is one of those people. I think the fans that are above casual, I think, have him pretty high. But I think he's kind of become a little bit of a forgotten winner over the last couple years. I don't know if it has anything to do with some of the controversial, things he's done outside of the game. I don't know what it is, but he's definitely, one thing I did for my list was I took my parents who were kind of less than casual Survivor fans, and I listed all the winners, and I asked them if they remembered them, and Heidick, neither of them had remembered.
I think it hurts to be a part of an unpopular season that followed a somewhat unpopular season. So I think, you put those together, and I think that has a lot to do with it.
And Alexa, I think you're spot on with that too, because while Marquesas is the one from the older seasons that people will now go back and rewatch because it's kind of gained a cult following. It's like the pure Survivor, Boston Rob, and all that. And so people will know Vesepi a little bit more. I don't think you or I have ever once recommended to go watch Thailand. And I know I just rewatched Thailand. I was like, it's actually not as bad as I said. But nobody's like, oh, you gotta go watch Survivor Thailand. It's the best. Like,
there's no like closet Thailand supporters out there.
No, and even like Celestina, whose favorite season is Fiji, isn't going to be like, you got to watch Thailand too. Like, even she draws the line somewhere. So it's just tough. And what's funny though, Adam, is you say that, but I talk about it at like with my parents. And if I talk to them, like what, like older seasons of Survivor, like what are your favorites? My dad will say the worst season of Survivor is the one with the used car salesman because he sucked. But so my dad remembers him very well, even though he probably wouldn't know his name. If I said Brian Heidick, my dad would go, I don't know who that is. But if I said the used car salesman, my dad would be like, oh, that guy was awful. But so it's interesting how, like, even though my dad has never rewatched an episode of Survivor in his life because that would take away from all the important couch time, that is somebody he still remembers. Like, 18 years later or whatever we're at now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he also some of the other winners from the less remembered seasons, still benefit from having beaten a strong cast. Like, Earl is kind of somewhat of a forgotten winner, but his seasons had some big names like Yao Man, Dreams, and even Boo. And Vesepi is kind of a forgotten winner, but her season had Kathy, Rob, John Carroll, Neela, Nalia. But like, Thailand, like some people remember Clay, Rob maybe, but he not only was it not a memorable season, but it wasn't a memorable cast, and I think that definitely is hurting his legacy. But I think if you're that step up from casual fan, I think most people have Heidick pretty high, if not top 10 for sure.
Right. And with Vesepia and who else did you just name? Why is it escaping me? With
Earl and
with Vesepia and Earl and like maybe someone like Fabio too. Sure, the seasons aren't popular, but you like them. Like Vesepia she's funny and she's scrappy, and Fabio is ridiculous, and Earl is wonderful. People don't really speak of Brian that way. So I think when you pair those two things together, he's going to get a little forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was amazing, though, that you guys were able to land Clay Jordan on the last episode. I feel like that was awesome. And any diehard fan, I mean, I know most people don't like Clay, but I see Clay Jordan, I'm like, holy crap, it's Clay Jordan.
Where
it's
did
really
he come
him.
from?
And that you got Rob Z. Rob Z is a great get, because as I'm rewatching these seasons with my girlfriend, she like loved Rob Z. She's like, where is he now? What's he doing? What is his life? And like, it's great that you've gotten him on multiple of these episodes. Bald headed, no hair. What's going on, Rob? But but I guess now I can say, Alexa, Michelle here is fine. What was your reasoning for keeping her? What was your reasoning for putting her? Because I don't know if it's too low or too high, but it seems just about right.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, maybe I wasn't sure if we should save Michelle for when you want to talk to her, because I know, for the next 3 hours, we're going to be discussing her. But I think Michelle and Sophie, like, I kind of like having them right next to each other, because I think they're really similar, where they're really underappreciated after their first win. And Michelle, I don't think anyone would argue that Michelle should have beaten Tony, but everyone's arguing that Michelle should have been second place. And Michelle, again, was a huge underdog this season. And even by some of the players, wasn't completely respected in terms of her gameplay. But she stuck around and she hung around. And Michelle has a clutch gene that is pretty unparalleled. So I think putting her in the top 10 would really only appease Phil and not many other people. But to me, she's a great character. She's an excellent winner. She's in the top 40, so I think this is a good spot to have her.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't have her that much higher, but I'll talk about it when I actually get to who we have next, because somebody left a comment on Russell's video where they were just like angry, and I'm like, no. But who? Oh, so I'll say who I have, and then we can get to Corey and Russell. But I had Courtney Yates at 29. She finishes second place to one of the greatest winners of all time, beats the greatest third place finisher of all time, had no business making it through. She gets 0 votes on Survivor China. 0. That is insane. Girl weighs 110 pounds and gets 0 votes the entire game. That's called playing the game the right way. And she wasn't a GOAT, because she gets 2 votes at the end and beats Amanda Kimmel. Like, that's insane. She gets 2 votes against Todd and beats Amanda Kimmel. That's unbelievable. Courtney Yates is amazing. Her heroes versus villains game, the fact that she's not voted out first is amazing. So good for her on that one. But that's why I had her at number 29. Not sure if that's the highest anybody had Courtney, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
I have Courtney Yates at 25, so I'm right in the vicinity.
Good for you, Alexa.
Thank you. She's very underappreciated, to your point. She's very appreciated as a character, but I don't think people talk about her as a player very often. And I think they'll cite, oh, well, look at, she did like not so great in Heroes vs. Villains. I don't think that's a really fair citation.
Yeah, I agree. Because I think her getting onto the jury in Heroes vs. Villains is a miracle. It's a miracle. I mean, her tribe loses, 5 immunity challenges pre-merge, and she doesn't go home till the 5th one. That's a miracle.
Yeah. Adam, who's your 28?
Or no, do Russell and Corey.
Oh, sorry.
So Corey had Andrea at 29. I know Corey I know Corey definitely valued players, if they return multiple times. So I think Andrea coming back twice, and the 2 times being a fan versus favorites, and the other being, I mean, I disagree, but being a game, I'm just going to defend him a little bit since he's not here. But Russell had Russell actually had Joe Anglim at 29. I know Russell loves, I think he appreciates the challenge physical game more than most. I also think Joe is one of those cases of Russell being a Survivor player himself, has a perspective that we don't see on TV because he's such a big challenge beast. I think when they're editing Joe, that's all they focus on. So they don't show his strategic side and his social game side. So we as an audience just kind of subconsciously think like, oh, he must not have a social game or a strategic game. Whereas if you talk to like Fishback or Wentworth or some of the other people from Cambodia, they'll say he was up there with Spencer as probably one of the most, people who was constantly strategizing and, figuring out. And, Joe builds challenges in his backyard and practices them before games. So I wouldn't have him this high myself, but, I get it.
I think it's a super high placement for him, but I do think Joe Anglim has a better social game than a lot of people think. It's just that his social game doesn't matter when he's as good of a physical player as he is. Like, nobody's going to ever let him, oh, he's such a nice guy, so let's not vote him out so he can go on a Colby run and win the whole damn game. Like, it's just not going to happen, and I think that's what just hurts him. But I do think he's a likable guy. I mean, there's no denying it. But yeah, that's all I got. I mean, those are 2 bad placements there from Corey and Russell, especially Corey. I don't know this Corey guy, and I know I'm going to meet him for the first time during the ALS awareness fundraiser. However, I might have to go against fundraiser code and be mean to this guy. I don't know if that's okay or not.
Yes, definitely do that.
Yeah. Anyway, well, let's go on to number 28, which on the official list was Natalie Anderson. Somebody had commented, I'm not even on the last video. They had said, I'm not even going to bother, but I just know Natalie is really low because of Phil's hate for her. And also, I don't have hate for Natalie Anderson. But second of all, if we're doing this based on who I love, Michelle Fitzgerald would be my number 1. So I hate when people say that. This is a very unbiased list, no matter what you want to believe. Natalie Anderson just isn't better. I think 28th is probably a fine spot for her. I had her much lower, but I don't think she belongs any higher than that. So that's what I got to say about that. But that was 28. I had her all the way down at 48. I'm curious to hear if you guys have her coming up in this episode, or I had her at 47. If you have her coming up in this episode, or if you have her even higher than this into the next couple episodes.
I had her at 34. So
Okay.
right in the middle of
It's because you hate her. Adam?
Yes.
I had her one away. I had her at 27.
Okay.
I think if she hadn't played at Winners at War, I think she probably would. This might sound weird at first, but I think if she hadn't played Winners at War, she probably still would have been low 20s or at least in the 20s.
I don't think Winners at War moved her.
Yeah, I know she obviously made it to second place, but I know we talked about Natalie at some point, but what I had said before was, I'll say it again, is she was the first person voted out at Winners at War, and it wasn't like, I can't remember who got voted out at Heroes versus Villains or
It was Sugar.
I know Sugar, yeah. For Heroes and Villains, and even with Game Changers with Sierra, it feels like when there's these all returnee seasons, it just kind of naturally just grows like a scapegoat person to get through that first vote. But it seemed like Natalie actually really contributed to her, getting voted out. And that, I know I mentioned this before, but coming into the game, everyone kind of expected her to be like this with Jeremy. And like within, by the end of day 1, she was by Jeremy's side, almost all the time. So she didn't do anything I think she hurt her game. And of course she came back, but again, the argument arises where, yes, she fought her way back, but because she was the first voted out, she had so much time to accumulate fire tokens and advantages, as opposed to Nick, who made it so much further and played such a better game than her. But because he got voted out, day 36 or whatever, he didn't, there was just no way he was going to come back unless it was some miracle. I mean, even when Tyson came back, he had to use an advantage to come back. So, she made it to second place, but I think it's a good spot for her.
Yeah, and I think it's a good spot. And also, I probably would have had Natalie Anderson higher. I definitely would have had Natalie Anderson higher had it not been for Winners at War. If we were just going based on her San Juan del Sur game, I think it's a better game, even though I think the whole blood versus water thing is weird. But the thing was, like, exactly what you just said. It's the fact that, like, she didn't do anything to separate herself from Jeremy, knowing that was going to make her a threat. That's a problem, and I still think she got screwed by production. She should have never started on the same tribe as Jeremy, but she didn't do anything to differentiate herself there. And the whole fact that she got second place, it is what it is. I mean, Tony said it best in your last episode, where he's like, it's ridiculous. We were giving her the tokens for her to get an idol to get back in the game. Like, that's insane. We would have never done it if we would have known. So, yeah, it's just interesting, all of that. But anyway, who did you have at 28? Who's your actual 28, Alexa?
I had Yao Man at 28.
Oh, that's who I had too.
You had him at 28 also? Yeah, I think Yao Man, well, I guess I can't say this because I have him so high, but I think in general, he suffers from his second placement not being very good. But he owns Survivor Fiji. He is that season. He is such a lovable character in a season that is not very loved. And he and Earl are these awesome underdogs together. But I think he's also a fantastic player. And I think when it came to Micronesia, there was really just nowhere for him to turn. And there was the huge, there was like James and Amanda had already had a relationship. He kind of came in alone. So, I don't really knock him at all for his Micronesia game. I think his Fiji game is fantastic.
Also, and this is mainly because people hadn't seen all of China, he was the most popular person coming back on that season. Right. When he came around that corner, everybody went nuts over Yao Man. Like, people loved Yao Man. And Jonathan Penner knows that. Eliza knows that. Amanda and James, like, they all knew that. There was no way you were going to let Yao Man get far into the game. He just had way too big of a target on his back. So I kind of chuck that one out. I mean, the fact that he even got his idol at the beginning and gave Johnny Fairplay a headache, I think that's great. So I'll take that. But yeah, I think Yao Man in Fiji is amazing. And to think of using something like the car to try to navigate and get further into the game and make a deal, ultimately it doesn't work, but that is using the game to the best of its abilities. And I freaking love it and I respect it. And I think it's amazing. So yeah, I got Yao Man at 28 too, Alexa. Great minds thinking alike once in our entire history.
For once, Adam, try to break it up. Who's your 28?
My 28 is Michelle Fitzgerald.
So, beautiful.
I think her, I think her Calron game is a little underrated. I think Aubrey would have been a fine winner. I think it was just one of those seasons where, the person who was second place would have been a great winner, just like, Tina and Colby, and I can name other ones, heroes and villains. But even if you do think Aubrey should have deserved to win that season, I don't think you can deny that Michelle played a great game that season. I feel like if she lost, she still would have been invited back in some capacity. I'm glad. She was one of the people I was the most glad to see on Winners at War, like low key, because I knew Winners at War was going to be two things. It was going to be, one, a way to celebrate some of the past, like, legendary survivors and see how they adapted to a more new school game. And two, it was going to be an opportunity for lower tier winners like Michelle, Sophie, even Denise somehow was kind of falled in that category, even though her Philippines win was amazing. And I think Michelle probably proved people wrong more than any other player. I mean, she was not the GOAT of Winners of War. I know she didn't get any votes. I think, if talking to the people at Winners at War that we interviewed for the top 100, they've all kind of told me that the reason Michelle didn't get any votes was because they wanted to make sure that Natalie didn't win. So any votes Michelle would have got went to Tony, just so it wasn't an Edge of Extinction person to win. So I love her Calron game and her. I actually like her Winners at War game better. I think she fought from the bottom.
You would think that.
She fights harder, yeah.
You would think that both. What's funny to me though is that I have her lower than her actual placement. Alexa, you have her lower than her actual placement. Adam, you have her lower than her actual placement. That means Russell and Corey must have ranked her like really high. And I think they're doing the recency bias. And this is what's interesting. I think the people who respected Michelle in Co-Wrong weren't shocked by her winners at War Game. We were like, yeah, she was good. Like, she knows what she's doing. She knows how to play the game. Whereas some people who didn't respect her game in Co-Wrong were so amazed that she could possibly play the game that they actually overrate her now. And the people who have been standing her since day one are actually the ones who are underrating her and having to defend why actually she belongs a little bit lower than that, guys. Like, let's not get carried away. I think it's interesting how that has completely shifted because of Winners at War, which I think is a worse game, in my opinion.
I can't think of any other players that are in that situation.
No one. I could
She must be in one of the most hardest to pick spots of winners.
Absolutely. So who did Russell and Corey have at 28?
So Russell had Malcolm, kind of, a similar thing with Joe. I think he likes, challenge beasts. I think he values that a bit more than us three and Corey did. Not that that's the only thing going for Malcolm. I think he had a decent game in Karamo, and his Philippine game has kind of been forgotten a little bit over the last few years. But let's see. I'm trying to Corey. Oh, and Corey had Denise. So
cool. All right. Well, let's go on to number 27, which is Wendell on the official list. I have him a little bit higher than this. Adam, you already said your 27 was. You already said your 27, right?
No, my 20. Oh yeah, my 27 was Natalie Anderson.
Okay, so you did already say that. Alexa, who was your 27?
So my 27 and 26, they kind of line up similarly to Michelle and Sophie. I have Vesepia at 27, and I have Chris at 26. I think these are two players who are. We talked about this. Like, they come. Chris, we didn't talk about so much because Vanuatu, I think, like Marquesas, has a cult following that is potentially led by 2 out of the 3 people who are currently podcasting. But I think they're both unbelievable winners. I mean, Chris is up there with what he has to have one of the top 5 to top 3 final tribal council performances. And Vesepia invented the underdog strategy. And so I think the two of them are not super appreciated because people aren't crazy about their seasons, or perhaps Jeff isn't so crazy about either of them. But I think they're both fantastic winners who really can. I mean, Chris controlled the game as soon as he should have lost control, and Vesepia was in control for a while and no one even knew it.
And I would even argue, and I have Chris in my top 5, so I would even argue that Chris Doherty, he not only did he have control when he should have lost control, he had control the entire game. He was never out of control in that game, despite the fact that he was always on the wrong side of the numbers. He always had a plan, and I think that's really impressive. And Vesepia, I have higher as well. But, kind of forgotten old school winners. So, it's tough. And Chris came in on this list here ahead of Todd, which I'm shocked at. I really thought Todd would be higher than Chris, but I guess Alexa, our cult following worked. My 27, I had Maddie Whitmore, which pretty much made people on Twitter were going, "Who's Marty?" Which made me die laughing. Who's awesome. Marty?
Also, Maddie there is Marty.
I know. Well, Maddie Whitmore would have been your winner of Survivor Gabon if Sugar just didn't go crazy at Final Four. I mean, that was the fun of Survivor Gabon is that it's the most chaotic season, and it is led by one of the most chaotic players we've ever seen in the history of the show, which is Sugar. And Maddie literally is on, I think he goes to 6 of the first 7 tribal councils or something. The guy's a literal personal trainer. And he cannot get anything right the entire game. He just keeps losing. He's always on the wrong side of the numbers, but he knows when to flip at the right time. Had he gotten to Final 3, he wins in a landslide no matter who he sits next to, and he goes down as one of the most likable winners of all time. He played a very Wendell game where his game was very, very quiet and very, very understated. And his back, he was always kind of on the wrong side of the numbers, but the edit made it seem like he was on the right side of the numbers because it was so hard to portray him as being on the wrong side of the numbers. And by the time he got down to Final 4, all Sugar has to do is say, yeah, we're getting rid of Bob. And he wins the game, I think 7-0 or whatever the votes come out to be. I think he gets all of them. Maybe 1 goes to Susie, but or Bob, whoever it would have been. But I think he wins in a landslide, and he would have definitely come back and played again. I wouldn't have been surprised to see him on a Heroes Villains, on a Winners at War, something like that, because he would have been unbelievably popular. One of the most likable guys to play in that era of Survivor, for sure. And it's just crazy to me that he never came back and played again. But, for somebody, he battled the entire game. And like Kelly Wentworth comes in at people's lists like around this spot sometimes. And I'm like, Maddie and her played a similar game, except Maddie was doing it for the first time and Kelly was doing it on her second go around. Like, it's just impressive that Maddie was able to navigate the psycho Gabon cast and get all the way to fourth place by being a nice guy on a season full of people who are just not nice.
So if Maddie had won, you would think that he's better than a lot of winners.
Absolutely. But I think his edit would have been very, very different too, because you got to remember, a lot of the stuff we were getting, it was kind of like Maddie was just smashing his head against the wall. No matter what happened, it was just not going right. And so I think his edit, if he would have been able to overcome that, would have been so epic that, I probably would have had him as a top 15 winner, a top 10 winner, something like that. But he also probably would have played again, which it's hard to say where his ranking would have been on the list. But I think he's by far one of the greatest players to never win. And I just think because he's on Gabon, which is a hit or miss season for people, and it's overshadowed by bigger characters, Maddie gets kind of thrown to the wayside, and I just think that's crazy. I think he's phenomenal.
That's a good argument.
Adam doesn't think so. He was laughing at me. But then again, he put...
I was shocked. I was shocked to hear that.
Yeah, it's my favorite. That's my hottest take, I think, by far. I put Maddie Whitmore 3 spots lower than I put Michelle Fitzgerald.
Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I'll just... I'll save my argument for a different day, but Corey had a Rupert at 27. Russell had a James, again, kind of fan favorites. Three like fan favorite challenge beasts in a row with Joe, Malcolm, and James. I guess that's kind of Russell's range for those types of players. I know he knows James, outside of the game. He's known him since middle school, I believe. So I don't know if that. I'd like to think that wouldn't affect his ranking, but that's where he had James. And like I said, I had Natalie around this at 27.
I've known people since middle school too, just not James. Just wish one of them was famous. But look, man, everybody's criteria here. James Clement's not a better player than Maddie, but I digress.
A fight that no one knew would ever happen.
I know, I'm just saying. And Adam's shaking his head, but Maddie finished 4th and James never really got... Okay, all right, number 26, because we could do this all day. Maybe we'll do Phil versus Adam in a Maddie Whitmore challenge. But number 26 comes in as Denise Stapley. I'm kind of surprised she came in only at 26 because I thought people would rank her higher because of her Winners at War Game, but I guess her Winners at War Game needed to end at the merge in order for her to actually... I feel like she fell off after the Sandra thing. I think she lost some of the respect of viewers as the season went on. But she came in at 26. Alexa, who did you have at 26? I know you already said it, so that's why I'm asking.
Mine was Chris.
Chris. Okay, cool. Adam, who you got?
This was the second of the 3 people that I somehow got the exact same spot. So I had Denise. I think her victory in Philippines is one of the best stories, definitely of the post Heroes versus Villains era, where they kind of focused less on like arcs and more on just big moves and resumes. I think her win was very big when it happens, and then somehow like a year or 2 later, everyone kind of forgot about Denise and Malcolm kind of replaced her, even though she beat Malcolm, even though he probably, in my opinion, would have won if he had gone to the end instead of her. But it just happened that way. So obviously I've liked this placement for her since I had her in the same spot. But I think her Winners at War Game didn't really affect it too much. I mean, on paper, the fact that she blindsided and, Queen Slayed Sandra, on paper, it seems like a huge move, but it really didn't affect the game that much, in my opinion. I don't think Sandra probably would have made it too much further. And I think the move wasn't that great in that she probably could have pulled it off without playing with idols and probably would have had a much better placement. I mean, she makes it to what, 6?
I can never keep track because of the stupid Edge of Extinction thing, but she
Yeah.
gets voted
Yeah.
out, I believe,
In the
when
final
there's 6 people left, right? Because then after she gets voted out when Natalie's in the game, right?
I thought it was before. No, I can't remember now.
Because Denise isn't bad. Denise doesn't go to the Edge of Extinction. Nick Wilson is the last one to go to the Edge of Extinction, and I think Natalie comes back in, so Denise gets 6th place. But
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think her Winners at War game affects her ranking, in my opinion, that much. So,
Alexa, do you have Denise higher or lower than this?
Give me a sec. I have her lower. Actually, I had her at 38, which is pretty low considering that I love her. The Winners at War thing, Adam, to your point, like, I think maybe it won't really move her because she had the Queenslayer moment, but then also completely fell off. So I think those can kind of negate. And I think Denise herself admitted that she lost a lot of steam in the second half of the game. So I think this is a good placement for her. I think she's a universally loved winner. So I think her first game, to your point, Adam, it's one of, if not like the best stories of a survival winner.
Yeah, I have her higher. I have her pretty high up. I have her in my top 20 at least. I won't say the exact placement, so there's some drama for Wednesday when I do the reveal. But I have her in my top 20. I think she was great, and I don't really knock her too much for Winners at War, but I do knock her a little bit just because towards the end it didn't feel like there was much fight left, which I always think is annoying. And I'm not saying that there wasn't any fight left, but it just didn't feel that way. My 26 was Jeremy Collins, which people find low for Jeremy, but his first game was
23.
He's your 23, so not much higher. I know he's going to come in later on this thing because he hasn't come up yet, but I don't know. I look at Jeremy and I say to myself, his first game, he was a great character and he seemed like he was in control, but he gets blindsided big time and goes home really early. He wins Cambodia, but didn't have nearly the biggest target on his back coming into that. He does pretty much invent a strategy, which is amazing. And I always said in Survivor Winners at War, Jeremy Collins is the perfect Survivor player. He's absolutely amazing. He could win any game. He's a great social player. He knows how to navigate that thing. But the more we've talked to people post-game, the more post-game press has come out, it doesn't really seem like Jeremy ever had a chance to win that season. And so the more I hear that, the more I'm like, maybe he wasn't as great. So I put him at number 26 based on all of that. I feel like that's like he came in as my 19th best winner. Look, there's some early Survivor players that are just hands down, no questions asked, better players than Jeremy Collins. I know that he's more recent, so he's more in people's minds, but there are just early. Earl is, I think, without a doubt, a better Survivor player than Jeremy. I think that Todd is without a doubt a better Survivor player than Jeremy. So when I start to break it down that way, and that's why I put him at 26, Alexa, you might as well just talk about him now since he's only 3 spots higher. What was it that put him at 23 for you?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think him inventing a strategy I think that's a huge part of it because his winning Cambodia is impressive. I think winning a returnee season, especially a season like that where everyone is extra hungry to win and to prove themselves. I think him not only completely dominating that, but him just creating pretty much a whole new school strategy. I think Jeremy is probably the new school Survivor legend. So many people say, okay, well, who's a legend in the 30s? How do you become a legend? I think it's Jeremy and probably Michelle because of the memes for Michelle. Like we just talked about the Michelle stans have almost taken a step back, and all the new Michelle fans, they're all talking. Jeremy, I think, is universally beloved. I think Winners at War, you're right, Phil. There's some weirdness there, and I don't think it was like Denise in that he lost steam. I think maybe he lost his footing just by losing Tony, by losing Natalie really early. I don't really know what it was, but I think Jeremy is a new school legend, and I think him inventing a strategy is just completely a strategy that a lot of people employ. I think puts him in a top 25 position.
Yeah, absolutely. Who did you have at 26, Adam?
Denise.
Denise. Oh, that's right. You already said that. Who did Russell and Corey have?
Corey had Heidick, and Russell had Jerry. I think he ranked Jerry the highest, if I'm not mistaken, Jerry Manthe. So he definitely gave her the big bump up. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I mean, the Heidick one and the Jerry one, I mean, interesting on both sides there. All right, let's go to 25. 25 and 24, I think, are really low for these guys. But then again, I mean, I know a lot of you have already said Chris Doherty. Maybe I just overrate him, but especially for Todd. Todd comes in at 25 here. I'm really curious as to why and where everybody ranked Todd, because maybe I just missed it, but I don't feel like I've really heard Todd's name yet. But Todd comes in at 25. I have him so much higher. It's a joke. Adam, maybe you could say, where did Russell and Corey and yourself have Todd?
Let's see. So Russell had Todd at 32. I'm not seeing Todd on Corey's list. I know he placed him, but I'm not
Control
seeing
F.
it.
Control F.
Let's see. I had Todd at no, I had Todd at 24, so he was a spot higher. So I just think that Todd. I feel like if he would have returned and would have made it to just the merge, I feel like he would have been on everyone's top 10 list. I think that it's just the fact that he played only one time and then was almost never heard of or spoken of again is what hurts him. But, you know, there's no denying that he probably had the best victory of first-time player, let alone a first-time player that never returns. You know, I mean, obviously Hatch in his victory was amazing and how he kind of invented the strategies that we still use today. But Todd was just kind of, you know, like Adam, was just a super fan who studied the show so much and took notes and, you know, just knew the ins and outs. And Todd did benefit of being on a season that was pretty recruit heavy. And I think there's been a lot of seasons that have been recruit heavy with a small mix of like a few super fans and then all recruits. But a lot of those seasons, like Nicaragua, the recruits end up winning the game. I think Worlds Apart and China, or like those two seasons where like the super fan being Todd and Mike Holloway kind of took advantage of realizing these players don't know how to play the game as well as me, so I'm going to align with them as opposed to getting rid of them first, which is kind of like a strategy that Survivor didn't lean in on with the edit, because I think they want to give off this impression that everyone playing Survivor has seen every season, so they didn't want to lean into that too much. But, you know, 25 out of 590 is a great spot.
Yeah, if he wasn't the greatest. But no, I hear what you're saying. It does hurt that he only played one time. Alexa, where did you have Todd? I'm just curious. I'm just trying to kind of gauge where everybody had him.
He has not yet been mentioned for me.
Okay, so Corey must have had him very, very low then for him to only be at 25.
Yeah, because Phil, you and I haven't mentioned him.
No, and I mean, I am looking at my list, and I hinted at this before. He's below somebody with the same first two letters of his name. So like, I'm surprised that he only came in at 25. I thought Russell would have had him lower or something, but that's crazy. All right. So comes in at 25. I think it's too low for him. I'm kind of surprised, but you know, we'll see. I mean, maybe this is a Troyzan situation where Adam did the math wrong, which I know for the Troyzan one he didn't, but maybe that's what happened here. I had Tina Wesson at 25. I think a very underrated early season winner. Showed that she could play the new school game in Blood versus Water, which a lot of old school players can't do, which is why I give her like props over the Dannys and the Ethans and those types of players of the world, because I think she played the new school game perfectly. I think she was great. She even wins her way back into the game, finishes 4th place on Blood versus Water. I throw all stars out. That wasn't her fault, but I had her at 25. I think she's phenomenal. Alexa, who's your 25?
Surprisingly a great challenge competitor.
Very good.
Competitor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And does better as
she gets older.
Does better in the Blood versus Water.
Yeah.
I already spoke about her. Courtney is my 25. So
okay.
Still some China love on 25.
And Adam, who did everybody else have at 25?
Well, my 25 was Tom. I think Tom, while a great player, I've always felt Tom was one of the more overrated winners. I think his Palau win was very good, but I think some people consider his Palau win amongst one of the greatest wins of all time. And personally, I just don't think he had to overcome too much obstacles and pull out to win. And then in Heroes and Villains, I think he was in a great position where it seemed like everyone wanted to work with him. Like if you go and watch the first couple episodes of Heroes versus Villains, everyone was saying really nice things about Tom. Like JT was like, I want to work with him. James is like, I want to work with him. And he, got an idol early on. He found himself in a really great position early on in Heroes versus Villains. The only thing was, I think he didn't have a strong power position, and he went with less numbers, where he had power with the less numbers as opposed to, and I don't think his Heroes versus Villains, I think it hurt his rank.
I think we're in a tough position with Heroes versus Villains, but that is an interesting point that he does like being the leader, and sometimes it's better to not be the leader.
I also think though, and so I have him much higher, and I think the thing was he went with Stephanie because he liked Stephanie, and also he felt that James was being just flat out rude to Stephanie, right. And so he kind of let his and look, it's up to you if you think it's right or not. Personally, I would never let my emotions get in the way of the game. I wouldn't. I mean, there'd be certain instances like what happened in 39 where I would hope that I'd be able to take a stand and say that's ridiculous. I'm not going to gaslight Janet because I'm not that kind of person. But also, like, he went against what he felt was wrong. And so I don't really knock him so much for that. And the fact of the matter is, if the Heroes would have voted out James instead of Tom, when they vote out Tom, they probably go into the merge with the numbers because that tribe, the Villains tribe, was falling apart. And I know Russell will never admit it, but I think if James goes home there and they keep Tom, the Villains probably win. Well, no, that was the problem, though. Tom would have gone no matter what because then the next one was the double boot. So they really didn't have a chance. But either way, that tribe would have been stronger, and Tom might have been able to survive. Colby goes home, and Tom's the type of player, once he hits the merge, he could have won those last challenges to actually get himself into the final three, and that would have been so interesting. So I don't really knock him for this. You probably have him the lowest, huh?
Yeah,
nice.
For sure.
I have him a little higher.
I mean, 25 again, like 25 out of 590.
Still great spot.
Yeah.
Wrong,
but the other,
yeah,
Maggie Whitmer. the other 25s were Corey had Fair Play, and Russell had This is where Russell had Jeremy, at 25. So
Jeremy's been in kind of a similar situation for a lot of people.
Yeah. Cool. All right, number 24 on the official list was Chris Doherty. We've talked a lot about Chris. This is where I had Michelle Fitzgerald. So for anybody who thinks that I let bias play a role in this, I put Michelle at 24. If I wanted bias, she would have been my top 5, no problem. She didn't belong there, though. I felt like 24 was a good spot. She came in at 23 on the official list. So I know, like, we just talked about Chris, but since we've all talked about Michelle a lot today, she ends up being 23. So we go Chris, then Michelle. But yeah, I had Michelle at 24. Also, it's a nice way to tell the haters, like, screw you. You can't now say that my list is invalid because I actually probably put her too low. So how does that feel for all of you? And yes, she is 23 spots higher than Natalie Anderson, despite the fact that Natalie Anderson beats her in Winners at War, because Natalie Anderson does not play a better game than her in Winners at War. Wes, come at me, bro. All right. Who do you have at 24, Alexa?
I have Coach, so very different from Michelle. This might be the highest ranking that Coach has had.
Russell.
Remember, mine was very, very character. Oh, I don't have the highest Coach ranking.
Russell's is, I think, way higher.
Fantastic. Okay. Excited for
Mine's
that.
a little higher.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, Coach, wait, when we say higher, do we mean number lower?
Higher. So when you're higher on a list, like, you think of it as 1 to 100, 1 is at the highest point on the list and 100 is at the lowest. So you're thinking higher means closer to 1.
Okay. Got it. Well, that makes me feel a lot better. Yeah. I mean, I'm very, my ranking is very character focused, but I think Coach, again, this is his third go around. So I think he deserves a bit of a knock for that, but could have won South Pacific, like could have done what Boston Rob did, but in a very like more culty way. And in my mind, like a little more of an impressive way too. So yeah. I think it's just, he just fell apart at the end, but I think Coach is an unbeatable character. And I think he's a pretty underrated player.
Yeah. I think he's an unbelievable character, no doubt. But in terms of a player, I just think his first 2 games, it was. Thank God we have this great character, but there's nothing on those 2 seasons between the ears. His 3rd season, he kind of does what Jerry did, where it's like, wow, he proved he could really play this game. But the first 2 seasons, to me, it was all character and no substance. Yeah. But I do understand why people would rank him super high. I just don't see it. But Adam, who did you have at 24?
Let's see, my 20. So I had Todd at 24. So I had a couple people that kind of fell in this range. So I talked about him a little bit. I think, just to repeat real quick, I just think if he would have returned at some point, I just feel like Survivor is kind of weird in that, like, you almost have to come back, whether you have an average showing or great showing, you kind of have to come back. I think so many people have just been so many great contestants, Chris, Todd, Earl, have just been completely forgotten because they weren't returnees. And some, the reason why they don't return varies from they just don't want to, or Todd's case, the success of Survivor, damaged his life so much. Unfortunately, I know he's on the bounce back. But they just didn't want to. Survivor didn't like them, whatever the reason is. I think Todd, just the fact that he played once and quit, or played once and didn't come back, hurts his legacy. And my list was kind of the more like legacy-based list, so that's why I had him in this range. But and I would love to see Todd back. I think if you're talking about players who haven't ever played more than once, I think Todd might be number 1 on that list for me.
He's number 1 on my list. For players who only played once, I think he's the best player out of all of them. Who did Russell and Corey have at 24?
So I wish Russell was here to defend this. I know he's a huge fan of this guy, but he had Rudy up at 24.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So
I want Rudy as well.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I think he did that because I think he just respects him. I think he thinks he would have gotten the vote at the end. But Rudy doesn't really play Survivor and Survivor Borneo. He's along for the ride. He really is.
Yeah.
Iconic for sure. One of the most iconic to ever play the game. But he rides the coattails. Who did Corey have?
He had Tina.
Okay, so me and him were really close.
We haven't seen
Has
yet.
Tina come up? Okay, so Tina hasn't come up yet. I was going to ask that. I was going to say she better be ahead of Jerry and Colby. I understand that those two might be bigger characters, but Tina plays 3 times in 3 different eras of Survivor, essentially. Yeah, she better be up there. All right. So as I said, 23 was Michelle. We already talked a lot about her. Alexa, who'd you have at 23?
I already spoke about him. I had Jeremy at 23.
Okay. Adam?
Let's see. My 23 was Amanda, who hasn't been shown yet. I was actually just about to say this about who were we just talking about? Tina. Was that this might sound like a weird thing to say, but it's very hard to play 2 good games of Survivor. I don't think if you made a list of a lot of, like, Hatch, is obviously very high on this list, but he didn't play 2 good games of Survivor, even though he's amongst the greatest. I think if you made a list of players who have played at least 2 good games, I really don't think it would be that long of a list. And I think Tina is on that list. And I think Amanda's, clearly on the list. I think China, this might sound weird, but China, in my opinion, might have been her worst season that she played of the 3. And she came in 3rd place and behind 2, legends of the show. I think she did amazing on Micronesia. I think he did a very good job at picking the people who were going to get her the furthest in the game. And then in Heroes and Villains, it may have just been because I've been working with Russell, but he loves Amanda's Heroes versus Villains game. I'm trying to see so Russell had Amanda in the 10 to 15 range. So hopefully he'll be on next week's recap because he has a very good defense for Amanda's Heroes and Villains game. I think it might have been the only player he was, I don't want to say scared of in the game, but one of the only players that he was, thought could beat him in Heroes and Villains. So she's going to end up a little bit higher than this, but I had Amanda.
Okay. No, I think that's fair. For For sure. I mean, I had Amanda lower, but I think that this is a good place for Amanda. I think that's the type of game Amanda plays. She plays a solid game. So I went with who was my 23? I went with Stephen Fishback. I think his first game was amazing. And I think that if he doesn't sit next to JT, he goes down as one of the best strategists ever. He helps JT get to where JT is. It's just JT pulled the wool over everybody's eyes and somehow hypnotized them all. I don't know how he did it, but I mean, Steven plays such an amazing game and is so integral to how that season goes down. It's really, really hard not to love him. So I have him there, even though he's a 0-vote finalist there, and he goes home, pretty early in Cambodia, and he has the gastrointestinal distress. I just think his Togenshien's game is absolutely incredible, and I just think ultimately he gets knocked because he sits down next to one of the all-time greats who just mesmerized every single person out there.
Yeah, that's Steven Fishback's a really good choice.
Is that all we had for our 23s? Did we cover all the 23s?
I think
I think Alexa hasn't said hers yet.
Mine was Jeremy.
Yeah, okay, so let's move on to 22.
Okay.
So 22 was Earl on this list. Personally, I had him in my top 10, but, Earl coming in at 22, for somebody who only played the game once and all that, surprised he came in higher than Todd and Chris Doherty, especially Todd, but that's who comes in at number 22. Alexa, who did you have?
I had Oscar Ozzy Lust. Unsure.
So do I. Wow, we have two the same in this one. That's really weird.
That's shocking considering I know neither of us are gigantic Ozzy fans, but Adam, you made a really good point earlier that it's really hard to do well twice. And I think people underestimate Ozzy, and I think people don't respect him, even though he was one vote away from winning Cook Islands against a universally beloved winner and someone who people consider to be a fantastic strategist for a very early season. And then he comes back and almost wins again. And yet people still write him off as just challenge beast, which is a fair argument. But I think the fact that almost won twice says a lot about him. And that it hasn't really been replicated.
I agree. And that's why I have him at 22. I think Ozzy was the perfect iteration of Ozzy. And once Ozzy and Colby both didn't win Survivor, you just knew that type of player was never going to win Survivor. Right. And it's never happened. And people will say, oh, well, Mike Holloway, he wins it. But it wasn't the same thing. Mike Holloway wasn't winning the types of challenges that Ozzy was winning and Colby was winning. Very physical, very everything was physical. And Ozzy was just absolutely incredible. And he loses 5-4 in the final tribal. After that huge comeback that him and Yule lead, it's just impossible not to give him the benefit of the doubt on this. So, yeah, I am at 22. I think he's the second best. I think I have him as the second best runner-up of all time. And the only person I have ahead of him is Dom, who I have at 21. So that's my 21 is Dom, who I have right ahead of Ozzy. I think they're the two best runner-ups in the history of the show. And I think there's a pretty big gap between them and next, which my next one is Steven. So I go Dom, Ozzy, Steven, but I would say that the gap between Ozzy and Steven is pretty large.
Adam, what about you?
So my 22 was Tina, who I know I kind of talked about a little bit. She hasn't come up on the list yet, so she's top 20, but I think a lot of people were upset when she won Australia, because they really wanted Colby to win, and kind of belittled her victory as, oh, Colby made the wrong choice. But, Tina really did play an amazing game in Australia. Still to this day, I think one of the best social games a winner has ever played. And, we just talked about her Blood versus Water and her kind of not only being a great social player, but also a great challenge beast and strategic player too. I think she's kind of one of those people who surprisingly encapsulates all three aspects. So yeah, I in a 22. Let's see, Russell had Wendell at 22. I know Russell's a really big fan of Wendell's Ghost Island game, which is surprising because it's so not a Russell type game at all. But
so not a Russell game.
But it beats Dom. That's ultimately, I think, what it is the fact that it could beat Dom. There's something so special there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if Russell comes next week, if we could bring it up, because he has a really great if anyone thinks Wendell at 22 is too high, Russell has a really great defense of Wendell. He really admires him as a player. So
I have him higher than that. I have him in my top 20.
Yeah. And then Corey had Rob C, who's kind of also one of those players who's kind of hard to judge because some people put Rob like low 40s and some people put Rob as the best player to never win because obviously, his all-star game, you could say he didn't really play a game at all in All-Stars. Like obviously Amazon, he played such a precedent-setting game that brought in a lot of new strategies that we still use to this day. So I feel like we should highlight a few of Corey's more controversial picks. Not that this is necessarily one of them, but he's going to come on the kickoff show. Maybe we should have him defend a few of his more.
Yeah, this isn't one of them though, because I think a lot of us probably have Rob around here.
Yeah, and Rob hasn't shown up yet, so he's actually higher. Than this, so. But,
and Brendan. Yeah, and Brendan Fechter's in the thing, best runner-ups. He put Parv in all caps. Yeah, obviously Parv's like the best runner-up, but she won. So I don't consider Boston Rob would be up there too. Like I'm talking people who didn't win the game, just runner-ups. But yeah, we could talk about that with Corey. I mean, I think that this is around the right spot for Rob Sesternino. I feel like this is the right range. Anything like top 10, I feel like is a little too high for him. But I feel like this is the right range. So 21 ended up being Colby, as we talked about off the top. I put Dom at 21, so another runner-up. Alexa, who did you have at 21?
My 21, I had Lex Vandenberg, which is probably pretty darn high for him. But I think Lex played a game that could have existed in the 30s in the third season of Survivor. And I think, there's a lot to say about him being very emotional when his name gets thrown out, which still happens, but it's not so much a thing in more modern seasons. But I think he played really, really hard on a season that had, Ethan was kind of like the chill guy. Big Tom was like the big character. Lex was a driving force behind that season and was very, very strategically minded. And so I think, and again, because this happened before there was even really a blueprint for the game, I think that speaks a lot to him as a player.
Yeah, I think that's a fair ranking for. I mean, I have Lex lower, but I think it's fair to if you were going to take one of the early school people and say why, Lex is a good person for that. Adam, who did you have at 21?
I had Rupert. I think that's the highest. No, it's not. It's actually not the highest. But I thought I was going to be the one who would place Rupert the highest. I thought Phil, you might be the lowest. Just because yours was more strategic based, especially towards how well they played their first season. Rupert didn't really have a strategy any season. I know I mentioned this last week, but. I think the best Survivor move that Rupert ever made was putting a rock in his pocket. So to fool Russell into thinking he had an idol, which it worked. Other than that, he's just really zero strategy. I don't think he ever had a good grasp on what it took to win Survivor, which. He probably had the complete opposite grasp on what it took to be a reality star. Because it wasn't like he was some big, larger than life. I mean, he was larger than life, but outside of Survivor beforehand, he'll tell you he's not a very popular guy. He doesn't have many friends. He's kind of always been the picked on kid. I know he leaned into that a lot in Pearl Island. So it's surprising that he picked up so quickly into Pearl Island's what it took to be. The star of the season, or co-stars if you, consider how popular Johnny got from Pearl Islands. But, I like Rupert at 21 on my personal list just because it's, more impact, icon, status-based list. And Rupert still to this day is, even though he hasn't played since 27 or he really hasn't played since 20, but, still a household name.
And I'm assuming it was Russell who had him higher?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. He played with him, so I'm not surprised. And he knows him better than us. And then who did Corey have at 21?
Corey had Sandra. So definitely the first we've seen Sandra. So if there was going to be a few picks, if there was going to be a few highlighted spots for.
Are we sure we want to have him on?
Let's stick a pin in that one. I would like to ask him a few questions.
All right. So how much did Russell pay him? This is a serious question because I've been doing this betting thing with Russell, and he has
betting money that you gave him.
Yeah, I've been doing this betting thing with Russell, and he hasn't paid me anything. And then this kid just goes and puts Sandra at 21, and I feel like Russell probably gave him 1,000 or 2,000 or something like that. I mean, you got to pay a pretty penny to not even put her in the top 10. Not only not put her in the top 10, but not put her in the top 20.
That's insane.
Yeah, I think Corey was definitely the one. Corey was definitely the one of us five who kind of averaged out seasons the most. So I think, she obviously had three, she played 4 times.
2 great.
Yeah.
She wins twice, and then she has 2 okay performances.
Yeah. And I think, there was that whole debate on if she quit Winners at War or if she just didn't want to play the edge. I think Corey leans more towards the quit side. We'll have to ask him on the kickoff show.
Well, that's wrong. I mean, I know Russell always says she quits and all of that too, but come on. I mean, Adam Klein broke it down on our podcast where he literally said there is a financial reason why she didn't play, and that's because you could literally break down the days and value out how much it's worth, or you could go on vacation in Australia alone, all paid for. And she's already won $2 million, had probably been paid by Survivor already. I mean, it's not even
not worth it.
All right, so if we throw out Corey's list, what's the real top 100?
Yeah, I'm gonna get totally shaken up.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, anyway, I guess that's how we're gonna end it. Everybody, you get to end with that taste in your mouth before we go into the top 20, which the top 20 is about. Go ahead.
I was gonna say Russell's 21 was JT.
Okay. All right, kind of low for JT too, but then again, JT did give him the thing, and I guess Russell just wants to hold that over his head until the day the guy dies. So, all right, well, that's where we're going to leave it for all of you as we go into our top 20, which I guess we'll be doing at some point next week. It airs tomorrow, right, Adam?
Mm-hmm.
The 2nd?
Tomorrow night, yep.
And then we have a whole 10 days in between because we're not doing this until the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So you have 2 episodes left of all of that. Maybe do it again, Adam. Maybe explain kind of what we're doing on the 13th just so people who are listening now can kind of get ready for it.
Yeah. So episode 9, numbers 20 to 11 are tomorrow night 8. And then next Wednesday, there will be a brief recap episode of numbers 100 to 11. Just be a couple minutes long. And then the following Sunday, so September 13th, we have 3 things to show you guys from Eastern time, from 4:30 to 7:30. There will be a live 3-hour kickoff show featuring us 3. Russell's going to come for the last hour. We have tons of survivors coming: Adam Klein, Wendell, Lex, Kathy, Coach, Fairplay, lots of. That's not even a fourth of the people coming. So lots of players coming in and outs. We're teaming with Jonathan Penner to raise money for 3 different ALS foundations. We're going to be all the money raised throughout the nights. We'll be going to. We're splitting 3 ways. I'm not sure what the foundations are. Penner's going to come on himself and explain it, and possibly Yule as well. Immediately following a 3-hour special, we have finale episode, which will be about an hour long, numbers 10 to 1. And then immediately following that, we have a recap show where we're going to kind of do this, but for what we're doing right now, but for numbers 10 to 1. You can donate in the live chat during it. If you donate a large amount during the kickoff show, whoever's on at that time will give you a shout out. We've got a lot of fun stuff planned throughout the day. So don't plan to do too much on September 13th.
Awesome. Can't wait for it. Really looking forward to it. Alexa, you got anything else you want to say about us? Anything going on?
Well, if that didn't entice you, we're watching The Little Mermaid next week, and we're going to be recapping that on our Survivor channel. For those of you who don't know, obviously Survivor is paused. So Phil and I are watching Disney movies, but actually really excited to talk about Survivor again. It feels very normal to have an entire day dedicated to Survivor. So make sure to tune in for that. We're really excited and hope everyone has a really good week.
Yeah, we'll see everybody at some point.